Hey everyone. Hello world.
Hey,
Hello.
hello. So good to see you all once again.
Same. So I think hopefully everyone is having a great Thursday so far. Really close to the weekend now, almost TGIF. 4 more hours to Friday. and okay, but TGIFs aside, we do have a very, very exciting event for all of you guys today who are tuning in. Really interesting topic. In fact, this is one of the topics, a very unique take at a talk that we haven't really done, a topic that we haven't really done before. So we're going to be listening to Andrew, who's the CEO of Jellyfish, later on his topic.
Yep, and a quick introduction to Google Developer Space for those of you who are not familiar. Before that, I'm Jia Xing from the Google Developer Relations team. And yeah, if you're tuning in from Big O channel or watching on Google Developer Space, a warm welcome to you. Thanks for joining us on a Thursday evening. So yeah, the Google Developer Space is a physical space in the Singapore office, but due to COVID, we moved everything online. So yeah, that's how we started our YouTube channel. So do keep in contact with us through there. We hope to welcome you into our physical space soon when everything opens up. Yeah.
Okay, and moving over the big O. So my name is Wei Yuan, and below me that's Julius. Oh, that sounds wrong actually. But the different social channels that we have for Big O, do follow them. We post updates on our events. And if you are interested in attending events like what we have for today, and also 2 weeks ago we had that small talk event, very interesting test or take on the live stream that we did. Do follow us on our different social channels as you've seen over here, and we'll definitely update them in terms of what events will be coming on next. Yep. So main areas will be like our website, Facebook, community, as well as if you're watching from Facebook or YouTube, those are the same channels that we're using in terms of updating you guys as well. So yeah, if you're on YouTube, do like, share, subscribe. Facebook, like it.
Yep. Similarly to what Wei Yuan shared, so these are all the channels that Google Developer Space is on. We have a website, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We regularly host events with startup and developer communities in Southeast Asia region. So do subscribe to keep updated with whatever is happening.
And speaking on updates, we do have some upcoming events. So the latest one that's going to be coming up is actually in 2 weeks. So for those who have actually attended our small talk event, that very casual sort of podcast-like discussion in terms of a single team, we're going to have the next iteration of that in 2 weeks. This is going to be on the 15th of September. So mark that date down in your calendars. The team itself is going to be more about working overseas. So we have our speaker, in fact, one of our guests, who's Bok. He's from Google, and he will be sharing with us, his vast experiences with working overseas in many different countries. Okay, and following that, we have another exciting event, in the pipeline for you. So again, if you're interested, in events such as like what we're doing today, this event over here, we have a engineering manager, Nadini Javago from Facebook, who's going to be speaking to us, in terms of growth mindset, her career, and it being a work in progress. So we'll be hearing more from her, during the actual event itself.
Super cool. And then without further ado, right, just kind of going to give a very brief introduction about Andrew Lau. Andrew Lau is the co-founder of Jellyfish, a co-founder and CEO of Jellyfish, where he helps engineering leaders use data to make informed management decisions and align their teams to business strategy. And before that, he was a long-time engineer, eventually became a VP of engineering at Endeca, where he managed an increasingly large team of engineers. And since then, he's gone on to co-found several more companies as a technical co-founder, became a chief strategy officer, and then eventually became the CEO of Jellyfish. So we have a very, very interesting series of background from Andrew, which for most of us, we never really had a chance to kind of experience in our career, which allows him to have this very unique opportunity to share with us, how we can better connect, the entire downstream and upstream cycle in an entire tech company. And we think that this is extremely important especially for engineers, right, who mostly consists of our audience today and in many of our streams before, to better understand what's going on in sales, what's going on in product, so that when we build our solutions, we can also cater to their needs and hopefully be able to make the company much more successful, knowing this kind of fringe background from the different teams. And with that, passing the microphone to Andrew. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, Julius. Thanks for having me here, and the rest of the Big O team. I wanted to thank your team, your crew, Google developer, and everyone here to actually stay up a little bit later on your Thursday morning, just to kind of chat. This is a cool topic, and excited to be here.
Thank you so much. All right, heading over to you.
Yeah. Okay. I got the mic. Great. Hey, welcome everybody. Really excited to actually talk about this topic. And Julius, you should feel free to be here too. Like it's I think, as you know from previous, I think the best way we can do this is kind of keep this an open conversation with other folks actually on the chat here too. So yeah, Julius, why don't you stay with me?
I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's always nice to have company here for these. Nobody likes to be lonely. So a quick hello to everybody in Singapore and folks on the time zone out there. It's kind of cool to be able to actually do this on a global setting, and it's also actually I do want to say hi. I got an old friend who just texted me that is in Taiwan. So my friend Azizi, it's so great to actually reconnect with you here in this setting. So it's nice to be able to reach across the world like this. So let me jump into this a little bit and kind of introduce myself. So like Julius and the team said, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Jellyfish. Jellyfish is an engineering management platform for software engineering teams to help leadership understand and align where their team is spending their time. We do this by connecting into tools like Jira and GitHub, the tools the engineers are already using to kind of help the companies make smarter decisions on where they're going. Right? So, but I wanted to go in a little bit to introduce myself and how I guess like why we were actually talking about this as a whole. So just for fun, I'm actually going to talk a little about little backgrounds and stuff like this. We're not going to have a super high tech slide today. It'll be just some fun images and get a chance to actually introduce myself and the topic we're talking about here. And then we'll roll into some questions because I heard we actually have some great questions that folks wanted to talk about. So this time here today is really for you all. So however you want to take it, please lead me. Lead Julius and the team here to take us however to be useful for your time. Because really appreciate it. I know it's scarce to find a Thursday night when you could be hopefully hitting a late happy hour right now or a late dinner. Instead, you're hanging out here. So it means a lot to you here. So really want to make this useful for you all. Now, for introduction, like I actually grew up in, hold on, team. Are you still there?
Yep,
Yeah, we're
we're
here.
here.
Okay, we lost connection here for a second. Let's see if you can, apologies. Can you still see? Is my screen still showing?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. Great. Well, I lost connection. My apologies. And it broke up here for a second. So I can't see you all anymore. So I need you guys to vocalize if I can't see. So hopefully you see a picture of San Francisco Bay Area.
Yes.
Did that come
Yep.
through? Great. Okay. So just FYI, I grew up in Northern California. I grew up in Oakland, California, across the bay from San Francisco. Just for context now, and a little bit of a nod to the time zone out there. My actually family grew up in Hong Kong. Up to a decade ago, I used to be out in Hong Kong on an annual basis. Hasn't happened more recently, especially not in this time. But I definitely miss and look forward to getting a chance to be in the same time zone with you all soon. Now, today I'm actually calling in from Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's actually right next to Boston. And so I am about 12 hours off from you guys right now. And we're just starting the day here, but it's cool that we actually get to do this end to end. Now, by introduction, like why do I have any validity actually talking here? So I studied engineering at MIT. I'm a engineer by trade. And as Julius mentioned, it's been interesting. I've gotten to see the evolution of both different roles as I've kind of moved through my career. And And today, I've seen, I've been in the seat of, building software. I've run engineering teams. I've been on the business side and seen startups in their various stages. And I think that gives a little bit of context to understand like how and why this all kind of fits together. Now, just for kicks, like I hope you all are doing well in COVID time. I think we're all figuring out new hobbies to do. So just for kicks, like, what are we all doing? Just sharing from my side. We're all been at home for 18 months. I've been working on my barbecue game. So American barbecue is where you cook meat for, 6, 8, 12 hours. So this is something that I've been actually working on. So if any of you ever make it out this way, beers and barbecue on me. Really excited to perfect other trades besides software and company building. And this has been a fun project on the side that I've been working on. Julius, any hobbies for you? What have you been doing in this time?
Oh dear. Apart from preparing for Bigo and pretending I'm productive for the rest of my life, I actually decided to be a bit more healthy with COVID because the only way you can get out of Singapore when we were in lockdown was when you're doing strenuous exercise. And so I decided to drop a bit of fats. And I hope that with the amount of weight loss I had, I will be able to enjoy your barbecue.
Well, so I'm doing the opposite. I'm putting on weight while you're taking it off. So
Oh dear.
this is a like maybe we should join forces and we could trade hobbies a little bit. It'll be fun. Well, okay, so let's talk about the topic today. The topic we're talking about is the engineering sales breakdown, and I think as Julius mentioned, as I introduced earlier, I think it's a Julius and I met actually on another meetup, across the world meetup, and we were just talking about this topic here, and actually how we don't talk about it enough, right? We all sit in companies that actually have teams that build things in engineering, have teams that sell things in sales, and I think we actually don't actually often call out the difficulty that happens between those two functions and departments, and sometimes the conflict that ensues. And so I think actually it's not optimal, and I'll explain why in a second where this happens. And so today was really just to kind of introduce the topic, maybe diagnose the problems, maybe learn a little bit around what actually happens here, so that like we can all avoid it. And it's not just for avoidance sake. It actually will help your companies be better companies. It'll help you be stronger engineers and more effective teams. And I think it'll I think hopefully I'll make us better by talking about it. So that's the kind of general topic today. And I'll bring it in a few manifestations around how we actually talk about this. So look, I just said engineering sales breakdown. Like, well, what does it actually mean, right? And so, some of you may be asking, well, like, have I been part of this breakdown? Have I seen this breakdown before? Well, have you been in fights with your sales team before? Have you sat there resenting the fact that they, sold something that was due on a certain date? Have you been in meetings where people make passive aggressive comments, why engineering can't do more? Why can't we do this and that? Like, why aren't they going faster? When we were smaller, we used to do all of these things. Why can't we do this and this? Or we're losing our lunch to our competitors. We can't do X and Y. So, I mean, I think it actually manifests in these kind of sometimes outward and kind of, potentially audible ways that people are actually kind of really, going at each other. But sometimes it actually manifests in, some passive aggressive moments where, you come out of meetings uncomfortable, where you were put on the spot to answer why something's not done by a certain date, or why can't we actually hire faster, or why can't we do X and Y, because they read somewhere at Google they like code much faster in this way. Why can't we do this? I think a lot of us probably have heard those kinds of conversations before. On the other side, if we actually have anybody on the sales and business side here, we've seen the other side of it, which is engineering's, well, I can't give you dates on anything. That'll be done when it's be done, right? Like we're doing agile. It doesn't tell us any dates when anything can be done. Do you understand how hard it is to build these things, right? All the while you're reading about other companies that are doing all of these things too. So I think it actually, if it doesn't manifest out loud, it definitely manifests in all of our heads as we have our dialogues across departments. But and Julius, I'm picking on you because you're in this discussion here. I think each of us have seen it, but like hopefully you're nodding here and seeing some of these things that I'm talking about. because at least you invited me here. So I think it resonated in your experience.
I have to admit that this is super, super common. One of the major issues that we have as engineers is that we can't articulate how we feel, but we can articulate our passive aggressiveness. So, so I was very curious, how do you deal with when engineers start doing this to you?
Yeah, it's a well, you hit on a private Slack channel and you put a lot of emojis in there, and and I think today, like, this is, so I'm glad you can bring it up, and hey, Julius, this is a first step in conquering this, so that you can talk about this today. But I think it's, by actually talking about this, I think we can get all better as a group in our companies. Now, like, let's talk about why this matters here. This isn't just warm and fuzzy. This isn't meant to be just a therapy session for Julius and I here on this. Like, yes, emotions and feelings matter. I think we want to make welcoming environments that we all can work effectively together, but that isn't just why it matters. Like, so you all hopefully are in startups, in companies, in nonprofits. You're aspiring to build these things. You're all here to actually make it successful, right? You're building open source projects you want millions of people to use. Maybe you're building race cars, and want more people driving them, right? Like, these are all things you actually want, right? So we're all part of missions that want to succeed. And so, why this matters is, these aren't just emotional issues. It's like, actually, companies are doing bad stuff, right? So, like, it's possible that we're building the wrong stuff, right? And if we're building the wrong stuff, then, we may not actually be selling as much or what we should be selling, or people aren't using our product as we actually should be doing. And guess what? If no one uses it, no one recognizes you use it, and you may not get the next round of funding, right? You get the next round of funding, hey, you're not going to get that paycheck. And if we're not getting that paycheck, I don't know exactly why we're all here doing it, right? We can't do it, right? So, because remember, the mission here is we're still trying to grow our companies. And so sometimes we can find ourselves at odds inside the company, but remember, we're all in one mission here. And so if we don't get this right, the job that you're doing right now, the company you're working for, may not be here, right, in the next time around. And I would consider that the ultimate failure, and not just that you felt bad coming out of a meeting, or you made someone feel bad coming out of a meeting. It's all of those things are to a cause, which is we want to make this a place that we enjoy working, but we also want a place that succeeds. So I want to hear from the rest of you guys. Like, you're here to succeed, right, Julius? I want to hear it. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. Okay.
We want money. We want freedom.
That's right. We want more barbecue, right?
Oh,
That's what
yeah,
we want.
absolutely.
Yeah. We want time to barbecue. No, but I think really, like, I think each of you have a goal. You're not just there to code for code's sake or to sell for selling's sake. It's part of a bigger mission. And so I think for us, that's like a big part of, understanding why this topic matters a lot. And part of this is actually, on a more nuanced manner, to make you all more effective in your roles, right? To take that frustration and channel this to be a better leader, a better future leader in what you actually do, because you can affect the people around you and your peers and across teams. Now, let's talk about, like, why this happens, right? I don't think this is rocket science, but maybe it's engine science here. But it's really about that we don't take the time to actually understand how each of these functions happen, right? So, that we were talking about this topic recently, and the revelation here is that, especially in engineering, we all spent a decade learning how to build and code and maybe work a little bit on process, but we don't spend a lot of time thinking about how the business fits together. And then if you're on the business and sales side, look, you definitely probably aren't exposed to how software is engineered, how code is built, how things are assembled. And so, you're coming at a world where there's not a lot of empathy, not a lot of understanding how other members and parties in your team and company actually work and why they're doing what they're doing. And so, like, a lot of this, while maybe a little cheesy, we're talking about empathy here. And I don't mean just empathy by feelings, but I think empathy by understanding how those functions work and how they fit together. And I think that's really a big part of, like, how we can actually effectively push through this, right? And so this empathy goes into, like, understanding what are people thinking, but what are their goals along the way, and how you're actually helping or inhibiting their goals, right? And that really pins down the nature of these conversations and why this actually breaks down. Because when you don't understand, then it's like, hey, I just need this thing. It's not built. Or like, how the hell did you sell this thing that I can't actually deliver by a certain date? There's not a lot of understanding of what's actually happening out there. So, a big part is taking that time to do this. So let's unpack, for the purpose of this, we're talking about engineering and sales, but I think this happens across departments. But we're actually going to break down engineering and sales today. And I know the bulk of the audience here today is probably on the engineering side, but we're probably biased a little bit in that direction. But I think this actually could be applicable across the board. So let's talk about, I think, I'll channel my inner engineer here around how, we feel through this. Look, this is a picture of Atlas, holding the world on his shoulders here, right? So what are we doing? Well, we're innovating. We're delivering that new feature out there. We're making that thing that people actually use. We're trying to keep it scalable. We're trying to make sure the bugs don't actually flow, because everyone's angry when there's bugs. And we're trying to actually handle a certain number of ops per second while actually keeping this thing alive. And all the while, the head of sales or CEO comes in and being like, hey, I sold something that needs to be done by Tuesday. I need this done. And you're sitting there, but I'm actually keeping the software alive. I'm keeping our door metrics up. I'm keeping the SLA alive. I'm actually, keeping, we're onboarding another 100 customers next month, and you never ask about that. You expect that to actually happen. So we're doing all of these things. What the hell, right? Like, I am holding all of these things together, and you're actually dropping another thing out there, right? And so, like, from an engineering perspective, you're like literally holding the machine together, right? It's tough, right? Like, it's you're covering all of these bases, and it makes it quite hard to like understand like how to actually hold these things, hold the machine together, right? So for me, like, I've been there before. I think some of you hopefully have empathize with this, but like it's tough. You're trying to hold the whole machine together, and it feels tough. Well, let's turn the corner and actually look at it from the sales side. And guess what? Hey, they're also feeling like they're holding the world together. And you're sitting here like, well, how the hell are they actually holding the world together? I'm Atlas. They're not Atlas, right? Like, how is this actually true, right? Well, so look, if you've ever, for those who've been lucky enough to actually go to the field and do some selling on this stuff, like, let's talk about it from a salesperson's perspective. They were probably hired in to the company after the thing you made was already built. Okay. They sit there and like, they call every day. They've got a long list of people that they're calling, or LinkedIn or emailing every day. And frankly, everybody's sitting there going, no, spam, hang up. Why are you calling me? Stop bothering me. And every time they're able to get someone to be like, well, this is the same, aren't you selling the same thing as the other guy? And they're actually selling it for a tenth of what you're selling. I got it for free. I got an open source project. Why are you trying to sell me anything? And so they're sitting there like every day getting hung up on. And the board, the CEO is going like, hey, so you guys still have another 200K to sell, right? And you got about 2 weeks here. So if we don't get that sale done, hey, you're not getting your salary, by the way, because half your salary is based on sales, and you're probably not going to be here next quarter. And by the way, the company's actually, we're not going to get our funding done, this year. So so you better freaking sell something, right? And so they're back on the phones on this again, being like, okay, I gotta sell something. And you get that one, get that airline on the phone, and you finally got someone to pick up the phone, and then they're like, okay, they're gonna sell a deal. It's a couple $100K. We're gonna do this. Like, we finally got it. They're like, after 30 calls, one guy actually said they'd do it. And the deal is they actually are only going to actually talk if you can get this done by December 15th, because they actually have to make it. They have to ship it by the end of the year for the fiscal year. So, okay, so I know this sucks, but like, it's the only deal. It's our only chance to make the quarter. So there's no other choice here. Like, we have to do it. And so that's where these folks are actually coming from, and they're holding up their side of things. And so, there isn't a lot of understanding of what else is going on. But they've been told they have one thing to do, and if they don't do it, they're gone. And so are the company. So, in some ways, both parties feel like they're holding the world, or in the world, in this case, the company's pains in their shoulders. And so, guess what? Like, we we get thrown into those meetings, and you know, Julius, I told you I sold a thing that has to be done by December 15th. I know you haven't started, but good luck. And this is where we're at odds with each other as a starting point. You ever been there?
Yeah, and as someone who sits between the engineers and the sales team, I would have to be the bad guy to go to the engineers and say, "Hey, by the way, we're not going to sleep for 3 nights because we have to deliver it by Tuesday." Not good, not good.
Yeah, I also, so I may actually hear for empathy with you. I mean, you're a hero there in that setting. It's hard. No one likes you at that moment. I'll tell you that. You know, your team thinks you're being cavalier, and the salespeople think you're dragging your feet. So tough spot to be in. I think leadership is
Yep,
hard in that way. So
I know.
like, okay, so now what, right? So the purpose of today's session is that you guys have a lot of questions. So we're going to talk about this more, but I actually wanted to throw some ideas around how we can actually tackle this. And again, the ideas today are more focused on the engineering side because, you know, as the folks here at Big O and Google Developer Space have actually said, like, most of the audience today is technical. So I'm going to lean on the technical side of ideas here. But hopefully these are catalysts to help you think about how we can bridge together in these things. And so I'm going to talk through a couple of ideas. They're pretty simple that might actually help the scenario I actually just described. So for the purpose of this, Julius, you're going to be my engineering team today, and I'll talk to you about how we should do this differently, right? And so a couple things. So this one's an easy one, right? Like, you know, everybody likes transparency. Transparency is like mother and apple pie. I love transparency, right? But you know, I think actually in engineering we talk a lot about transparency. We talk about, you know, we work in agile frameworks that, you know, talk about how we estimate things. We work in wikis. We work in open source. That those are all transparent, right? So we share. I think the sometimes a mistake though is the word transparency. We forget that we often talk about transparency in technical speak. We're transparent, like literally the wiki is open, you can read it, right? But that's not sufficient, right? It's not transparent to someone that actually isn't a technical audience, right? So, you know, Julius, I'm picking on you because I think you just described yourself as a technical leader here. Like, you know, that transparency isn't just about making it open. It's about translating and actually making it transparent to business. So I began the scenario earlier by saying, like, hey, I know, Julius, you guys are trying to keep, you know, this many ops per second, and you know, you're trying to actually you know, onboard 100 customers next month, and make sure that the bugs are fixed and all of these things. And, you know, I show up and tell you have to deliver this thing by December 15th. So like one of the ways that you could help me, I'll play business person in this conversation, is that you should be sharing like where your team is spending their time. I probably showed up in our office in Google Developer Space where we're actually having this conversation, and I didn't know that you're actually spending, you know, a third of your time just keeping the system alive and servicing the 100 new customers every month, and just keeping the kind of scale in place, because I didn't know that you're spending a quarter of your time servicing bugs. I didn't know that, like, you're actually sitting there and actually you know, working out usage issues on the product that I didn't know of. And so by the time you actually thin that all out, I actually didn't realize that you actually only have one person on your team building features. And I just signed him or her up for something to do December 15th and not do something else. I probably didn't wake up knowing that, because in some ways you could argue, Julius, you and your team are doing such a good job. I assumed the software was infinitely scalable. It was magic and all of these things. And so, like, I think first step is that you, Julius, need to provide that transparency to the team. It'll help you and help build an empathy and understanding where your team is spending the time. But it isn't just about that. I actually think you should be fostering conversation, because if you told me that you're spending half your time as a team on scale, maybe, like, as I'll speak for the business here, it's possible I forgot to tell you we're not going to onboard 100 customers next week. Oops. Like, you know, I cut a new deal and we you know, with the Google API team, and we're actually not going to actually shove new customers through, and we didn't talk about it. So it's possible, Julius, that you are spending half your team's time on a scale that we won't actually hit until January. Because we actually are going to wait till we actually launch that feature I just signed up for December before we push these customers. But we never talked about it. And we never talked about it because both sides, I forgot to tell you, but you also didn't tell me that half your team's actually working on scale and that we probably can defer the scale conversation for a little bit. It's not ideal, but one of the ways that you can help lead this conversation is providing this transparency. And that compromise and that trade-off and that discussion around where our time goes is how we actually find that optimal place that we can actually get the things we need to do today and defer the things we don't need to do right away. So I know it's a simple message here, but that transparency really helps lead that conversation. And I encourage us all to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Should we ask our questions now, or we wait until?
I actually have one more scenario here that we could actually do. So I think there's another habit here, and again, I'm picking on us engineering folks here for a second. So like, look, when I started my career 20 years ago, we didn't have Agile. We probably barely had Waterfall. It was a lot of like, I got this, trust me, right? I think all your teams today are probably using some form of Agile. If you're a bigger company, maybe using Safe, but you're probably using Kanban, Scrumban, something in there. The point being is you're using an Agile process, and most of these Agile processes actually really acknowledge how software estimation is hard, right? Like, and we sit there and we talk about how we can talk about story points, we can talk about sprints, we can talk about how Kanban's a machine, but like it's taught us that we're adapting in Agile along the way, right? Now the challenge is on the business and sales fronts, unfortunately, business and sales aren't often, and marketing aren't run in such the same manner. In fact, a lot of the time, businesses actually demand plans. Like, when are we going to ship this feature? Well, why? It's because we have to coordinate launches. We have to work with partners. We have to time collateral to be made. We have to sign up for trade shows. We have to schedule webinars. We have to actually go on, a Google Space Big O talk, right? Like, all those things require, Julius, you and I have been talking about this for over, probably 6 weeks here. It requires timing to actually plan all of this stuff out. And so in some ways, business needs are often at odds with engineering processes. And now the problem is, I think it's very easy that often, your head of sales CEO goes over to you and asks you, when is this going to be done? And you say, well, I can't tell you. I can't tell you because, Agile told me I can't tell you. And I don't know. Like, I literally don't know. Right. And so there's often this thing where engineers will be like, well, I don't know. I can't give you a date. And sales sitting there being like, well, I can't do launches. I can't commit commitments to the board. I can't actually plan marketing campaigns. I can't talk about customers. I can't put an agenda together for the trade show or the webinar or a conference. Right. And so that leads to a lot of animosity around that part of it. So I'm actually pushing all of us on the engineering side that we can actually do better than this, right? So it's not true that we actually can't answer it. I'll start with this question. Like, do you think it'll take us a year before we finish this? Are we gonna get this done by 2023? Well, of course we're gonna get this done by 2023. This is dumb, right? Is it gonna be done by next week? Well, of course not. It's gonna be done by next week. It's like we still have X number of sprints in. Okay. Even if the answer is to say hey, we're going to get it done somewhere within the next 2 to 3 months, say that, right? Don't be obstinate and actually just say you can't pick a date because Agile told you not to. Businesses still need to make trade-offs here. And you actually often know a lot more by intuition than you're able to communicate. Remember, folks don't understand how software is made in Agile. So do your best bet and say, hey, I think it's going to be in 2 to 3 weeks or 2 to 3 months. And I'll revisit this to you in a week. I'll update you, right? So communicate a plan. You have a plan already present. It'll help others actually help make decisions along the way. So simple tip, but I think it actually will make a big difference in building bridges here on that. So Julius, you were actually just talking about let's jump to questions. So let's do it. And I'll let you lead the way here around how we actually want to tackle this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. That was a fantastic discussion. I think what we can actually do is there's a bunch of pre-submitted questions, and I think from the audience, please do ask your questions as well in the chat, and we'll do our best to accommodate as many of them as possible. And I think Wayne will be starting.
Yep. Thanks, Julius. Thanks, Andrew, for I think that was a really great lead in. So let me cast the first question over here. So first question over here is how can sales nuance whether a product feature request is worth building to secure a contract? And I kind of want to use this question to call back to what you just mentioned, having the engineers commit to some sort of like time frame. When can we build this by so that sales can make better decisions. So from the sales side, what other things would you look into, in terms of deciding whether a feature is worth building?
Yeah. Well, so of course, like there's no magic answers for all this. So let's consider this a group discussion on these things. The question is, let's restate this: is like, how can the business decide whether a feature is worth building to secure a contract, right? So look, there's a bunch of lenses we should talk about this, right? Like I will say, reminder, we're in a business together. We're here to grow. We're here to survive. So like, there's never one right answer. Like if you're down to your last dollar and if you don't sell a contract to build something like, and it will not survive, well, I think it's pretty clear what to do in that situation, right? So, I think there, in the limits, I think you all know the answers, which is this is, not worth a discussion if that's the case. And if it turns out to be someone, like it's a free feature that costs you nothing to do and you get $1 million for it, I'm sure you also know the answer to that part of it. The hard part is always the stuff in the middle. I'll give you two lenses to think about this as the reality here is it is scarce, right? Like you don't have an infinite team here. So I think it's actually really important to like really talk about, well, how much is this going to take? How much time is it? But that statement alone, I think, is like an estimation topic. That's not sufficient, right? The better question, I mean, like you need to know that, like it's going to take 6-person months, 6-person weeks, right? Like just eyeball this. But that alone probably doesn't help you make a decision. It's actually a better question actually of opportunity cost. What aren't you doing, right? And I think this is where often product management is an important part of it, and that's just a function by description. But conceptually, the answer is, what are you not doing along the way? What strategic objective are you not accomplishing by doing this feature, right? And so like that trade-off is really important more than that. So that's lens one. Lens two is, well, it's just it's a cost picture on this part of it, right? Which is like, do you believe, like how much money are we talking about here? If it just pays that engineer's salary, it's probably not enough in my view, right? Like, really engineering is scarce here. And like it's a question of leverage in this case. So if it's just paying your engineer's salary, like fine, it's sufficient. You could probably hire another one just to go do it. But like you would hope that everything your engineering team is doing offers way more leverage than one thing, right? Because otherwise, the said customer could just go to a consulting shop. And so you're really just turning into a consulting shop in this case. Now, when we talk about leverage here, like one of the things I'm talking about here is if you build it once, will lots of other people use it? That's leverage, right? And so, of course you want to do things with leverage here. Everything we do, since engineering is scarce, like, everybody on this call is probably special, expensive, hard to hire, hard to retain, and their time is super expensive. It should be worth more than one-time usage on this stuff. It should be worth something, right? That's offers something. So if it turns out that like, that feature will help you get the next round of funding, then sure. But I think in a form of leverage that really is supreme is if you can actually get lots of usage beyond that one customer here, because that means you build it once and sell it 50 times, right? And the last bit to that is that you should be charting out where your company wants to be in a year or two, like just conceptually by features. If this request helps you get towards that path, then consider it, because that's leverage, right? And someone's paying you for leverage on that stuff. And it might be that if you do what I'm talking about, which is mapping things out for a year or two, it's possible this feature request might not be the thing you would do immediately tomorrow if it wasn't for this contract, but you were going to do it 3 months from now. Well, all you're doing is just reordering your priority because someone put some money up front. If they're going to give you money to reorder, then do it, right? Like it's you're still going to where you want to go, right? And that's why I think it's important to chart out where you're going, because otherwise you're just kind of taking on deal by deal. Like, is this profitable? Is this not? Right? You need to be going somewhere as a company, right? And I think the art in early stage startup and this stuff is picking the contracts and customers that will lead you to where you want to go, right? Is a big part of that principle. Make sense?
I do have a little bit of a follow up there, but
Yeah, please. Yeah.
just forgive me if it sounds a little bit elementary. So, who, in your opinion, who hosts the, like, basically every single feature that's green lighted? There's always someone who's the one deciding whether it goes or not. So, who's the one that should hold the needle in, let's say, maybe an early stage startup towards green lighting this feature? So, in terms of deciding whether leverage is enough to get it ahead. Maybe if I can also lend like an example here. You talked about engineering earlier on, and we talked about, like, difficulties of, let's say, as an engineer, let's say if I have to spend 4 hours a day, half of my work day fixing or doing, like, sort of production ops, when I can maybe invest a full, like, 2 weeks of my time to fix it permanently. But because we're doing that because we need to get, let's say, some other feature built first. So, what exactly is the correct priority here? Who pushes the needle to decide this?
Yeah. Okay. So I think you asked a bunch of questions there. I think you asked how we do it. You asked organizationally what the right thing, what the roles are, and then you gave me a specific example that you hit on Tuesday. It sounds like, and you're trying to figure out how to make the trade-off. So I will, so let me answer those. So I think conceptually, what I'm describing here is product, right? This trade-off, right? So as you guys grow as an organization, these trade-offs of deciding to do a feature or not this feature, that's a product decision, right? So you might have a VP of product, a head of product, and those things. In an early stage startup, most technology startups, the product is owned by founders usually, right? Because the founders are inventing the manifestation of this thing, and they're implicitly doing product trade-offs by doing that. They may also be an engineer, they may also be the sales guy, all of those things. But that is usually the role that actually plays a part in a smaller company. And then as you grow up, it professionalizes into a product function or a product head and a product manager and all of those things that actually happen in that trade-off. You then brought up actually last one here, which is actually around like building and fixing this thing sustainably. And that actually, I'll nuance that, is I don't think what you just described is a product decision. That's actually one of architecture and technical practice. And traditionally, I would say that some people might call that tech debt. That might actually fall into architectural decisions. And I think that's often in the purview of, the engineering leader, the architects, the engineers, and those things. And so that's a slightly different decisioning that often plays out because, like, if you think about product might come from a non-technical background, they're not going to make that trade-off, right? But in that setting, like, I actually think that this is important. You're bringing a deep nuance here, which is companies should establish roughly what their goals and budgets are from a tech debt or a paying down architectural things, or it's just built in the feature costs of things. Those are things that I think there's not a one size fits all. I think these are things that you do sort out as your organization grows and as it kind of figures out its own voice in these things. But those are usually the roles that fit into this discussion. Make sense?
Yep. I like the part about the budgeting. Sorry?
Hopefully it helps you for your meeting coming up. I'm making fun of you.
Cool. I think, when should I ask the next one?
Oh, go ahead, Julius.
Okay. So, Andrew, earlier you did mention quite a bit about trade-offs, and one of the words that you use is eventually you will professionalize, the team. So one of the things that normally happens in a startup, especially in the early stage, is that you will have a CEO, and because the startup is strapped with cash, then it's not able to actually hire the professionals to come in and be the one to tell the CEO or whoever the decision maker is at that point, these are the trade-offs that we're making. And so you will have junior product managers, junior sales team, junior engineers, who's going to be an order taker from the CEO. And it could have different kinds of effects, right? In terms of, the direction, in terms of their mental health, their burnout, and so forth. Do you have any thoughts around how we should navigate around this?
There's a lot you just threw in there. I actually think I think you made some assumptions that I don't necessarily fully agree with. I think you're talking about I think yes, you're describing a scenario that happens often. I agree, but I don't think we should assume fait accompli that's the way it is, right? I actually don't fully subscribe to this concept of junior or not junior. Look, we were all 23 at some point, and we're innovating great things. I hope we all were. And so I don't want to assume just because you're early in your career that you can't make a dent on these things. I meet very smart people that are very enabled in these things. But yes, there are patterns that this is the case. I think again, some of this is as you grow up, as we evolve in our careers, we see more patterns. We see more war stories. We fail more. We see other people fail. We attend more webinars like this. You learn along the way, so that accumulates some of that knowledge and awareness. I actually think look, you're bringing up a fair point around if you are strapped for cash, then you're affording what you can actually afford as a team. And I think that's a pragmatic answer that you can't do anything about. It's not like you're going to pull more money magically until you get there. I actually think what you described this scenario probably falls on the CEO and the founders and the leadership team. If they're treating their engineering team or their product team or their sales team in this way, I think they're, in my view, setting a tough culture there, right, on that. And maybe they didn't interview the right people either, right? So I probably don't love to hear that that's the de facto in that space. And I think we should all aspire to not build our teams that way. I do think though that these roles do appear at different stages of companies, right? So probably for the first 10 15 people of the company, they're probably all technical of some form, where your founders and CEOs are playing product, playing salesperson. You're probably hiring your first salesperson or field person at 10 15 people. You might be hiring an engineering manager around that same time. And maybe your first marketer as you kind of move towards 20 people. I don't think you really kind of fall into actually hiring a first product manager until you kind of cross that threshold, right? And to your point around hiring kind of experienced professionals, you may not be able to afford them until you kind of, and again, I know funding is all loony these days around the different letters and what they mean, but until you actually kind of get that kind of, maybe in stereotypical A round, then you start bringing in people with a lot more experience in these roles. And I think those things usually go kind of lockstep, right? Because funding doesn't come until you hit that point where the business is starting to look like a business. And so it needs to be professionalized. So all those things kind of arrive in lockstep. I wouldn't, feel bad that you haven't hired, some grizzled, 30-year veteran in that space when you're 10 people. It probably won't work anyways. You probably can't afford him or her, and it probably might be a misfit. So again, every company's different, but I think, all of those things usually happen as a company starts to get into gear. And as the things I usually see as they actually happen a long time.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I was wondering as well, right? Because there's also a part from, let's say, for example, as someone from sales and someone from engineering, who has to go through all the pressures of, kind of keeping your startup afloat, for the first several months or not even, or even years, right? And there will always be this kind of thought whereby, there's this company right next door, we work from New York, and this kind of, they can actually jump into and so forth. And they have to keep thinking about, whether I should stay and live the dream, and hopefully my stock options kind of amount to something. Or there's this guy next door who's going to pay me twice the amount the startup is paying me, and I'm sure of the stock options. Do you have any thoughts around how we can kind of keep people in the company, knowing that there's all these options in front of them?
I mean, you're talking about retention. You're like, how do you
exactly right? Yeah.
retain people given all those things? I mean, I promise you, there's no silver bullet, because if there's a silver bullet, everyone would do it, right? I actually, but I do think that I think the way to think about this is it's not just about stock options or money and all of those things. I think before you hire people, you should ask yourself. I mean, I think people talk about culture, and the word culture can be so cheesy. I don't think it's cheesy. I think you have to really ask, why are you here? Julius, why are you here? Wait, why are you here? Right? Why are you in the companies you actually are? Right? And I probably hope that it's not just money, right? and I hope it's not just for the stock options, because if it is, you probably should go work. I'm picking on you, Joe. Like, you should work at Google, right? Or you should go work at finance. You're going to make more money. The expected value is there in a better place. We shouldn't be doing what we're doing just for the finances. It doesn't mean that I don't want you all to be screaming successful and rich, but that can't be the only reason you're here doing it, right? We have to be doing it here because we believe in a mission. We like making things. We like manifesting things. We have the hubris that if we weren't doing this, then it wouldn't be happening. It's also because I like working with other people that have that same mindset. I like coming to work and actually having a debate and not agreeing and working it out and inventing something together. That's what culture really means. And I think, to me, you should know that about yourself and your company before you get hiring, because you should actually find people that are like-minded as well, right? And then, like, those are the people that will stick with you when you have your bad moments. And yeah, you can't retain everybody forever, because everyone has to live real life and they have to pay their rent and, like, support their families. And so, of course, empathy to that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't care about money, but I think you should know why you're here and why your team is here. And you'll build your company in the right way for that. Because if you're sitting there screaming about, options and salaries, the only reason you retain people, I promise you won't retain them very long, no matter what you do, right? They're going to go to a hedge fund. They're going to go to Google or whatever. It's going to happen. John, I'm just picking on you, right? No, but I think it's, we're all in it for different reasons. And I think you should sort out your team and who you're hiring for those reasons.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Just in case my boss is tuning in, I'm here because I love the mission,
There you go.
because I love the work that we are doing and the team. Yeah, so thanks a lot, Andrew. Yeah, we have a question from Cindy, who's tuning in from US. So she asks, I assume it's a she, he or she asked, how do we do an effective, transparent meeting between the engineering and sales team to get an optimal result? Could you give a real life example?
Ooh.
Yeah, so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it was okay. Hi, Cindy. I'm actually not sure where you're coming from, but maybe you're on my time zone and it's early. And if you're on the West Coast, it's really early. But anyways, thanks for tuning in. I actually think that there's so I'm not going to pose this magic meeting where you actually put engineering and sales in the same room to have a loose agenda. I actually think that engineering and sales should do their various meetings in business as they actually do. All right, good. Pennsylvania, you're at your 9 o'clock, so hopefully had your first couple cups of coffee here. I actually think so. I'm assuming, again, given the populace here, you're on the engineering side, and most of the people actually on the call. I actually would suggest a couple things. I do think that you should be attending forecast calls, and so most sales teams actually do, weekly or whatever, where they will go through the deals that they're actually in flight with and their status of things. I think you should attend forecast calls. You should understand where the company is relative to their quarterly targets or monthly targets along sales. You'll understand the pressures of actually what's happening along the way. I think you should be attending those things. And just so you actually understand what is the sales pressure. Are they like, are we 3/4 to the quarter and they've only sold 1/10 of their goal? Like, you're going to get a little bit more empathy around their stages of things, around what they're actually happening there. And I think you should do that. And Cindy, I'm not sure if you're if you're a builder yourself, or you have a team. But either way, I think I believe strongly that your team should spend time in the field. I think you should you should act as a sales engineer. You should sit in on sales calls if you can. I think you should listen in on those things. I'm not saying every sales call, but you should actually make it a goal that you do at least one every month or whatever it actually is. Unless you hear a customer yelling at a salesperson, you probably don't build that empathy to understand why that sucks. Or sit with a customer success call, field support tickets. I think unless you build that empathy and understanding of what the business pressure is going on there, you won't know. And I mean the business pressure actually happening on the line in the field on a sales call, but also in the macro around kind of attainment to sales goals. Unless you have empathy of both the the high and the low, you're not going to understand the pressures that are happening in the business. And if you're in the settings, it's often you'll be like, oh, I can fix that bug. It'll take me 2 seconds. Or you could actually go like, oh shit, we're really, excuse the language, we're really behind in the quarter. Like, I better figure out how we're actually going to deliver X, Y, Z. And so I think that's from the engineering side to sales. One thing that if you're representing engineering and product, reciprocally, I do think you should set up standing meetings with the sales team, or at least sales leadership, on a monthly basis, which is kind of roadmap review. And so you should be actually looking at what's happening, what's getting delivered over the next 6 months, what's actually happening, what are the trade-offs. I'm sure that they have opinions that things should be done differently. You need to be listening and communicating the trade-offs. A suggestion from a product perspective is never say no. You say like, hey, these are the things we're doing at the schedule. Like, I like that you have a new idea. What do you think we should not be doing on this current schedule right now? And engender the conversation this way, like, because the sales team, the business as a whole, needs to understand this is a zero-sum game. If we do this, we're not doing that, right? And really be having that conversation in a regular manner. I think product engineering teams that fail are the ones that don't talk to sales. Job of product is to talk to sales in the field on a regular basis to understand the trade-offs, right? And you're making trade-offs as a company. It may not make everybody happy along the way. So I think, Cindy, those are two separate meetings. I actually think that both you should be attending if you're on the engineering side, but also facilitating to the field. Does that make sense? Hopefully that addressed your answers there.
Yep, I think it does. I think Cindy also has another question, so I'm just gonna flesh it out real quick. I think you mentioned about forecast calls and roadmap reviews.
Yeah.
So on top of those two, is there anything that Jellyfish does that helps both engineering and sales team build better work connection?
Well, hey, Cindy, you're like a plant for me, right, in this. So, like, we're trying not to be overly jellyfish for this call. I mean, of course, proud of what we actually do, but I think for the purpose here of actually this conversation, I think it's important. So, I actually talked about one of my suggestions was to be transparent and talk about what teams are actually doing. And I actually don't think companies actually articulate that enough on a regular basis. And so I do think that both on your management team and on the board level, engineering teams should be communicating to both those parties on a regular basis what the teams are doing, what they have been doing. What's their split of time in whatever way the company finds strategic, whether, let's say, new features versus tech debt versus bugs, right? And so, yes, Jellyfish actually automatically produces that data, right, to make it easy, right? Because the reality is, like, well, how would you do it otherwise? Well, you could run a time card and ask everybody what they're doing. And the reality is, I think most engineers don't like to fill out time cards. You could try to actually connect it to, GitHub or Jira and just pull it into some Excel and BI. The reality is, we all know we use Jira and these tools in messy ways. Like, Cindy might do 30 tickets a month and I might do 3. Am I actually 10 times slower? It's probably maybe, but we're probably just different in work styles. So Jellyfish automates that kind of collection of isolates and helps figure out what everybody's doing so that we can generate reports and understand what we do. So we do it on a weekly basis where we actually communicate. In our case, we split up between roadmap, keeping the lights on, and customer demands. And we communicate that on a weekly basis to the management team in an automated fashion. We also communicate quarterly with the board so that everybody understands where our time is actually going, so we can engender a conversation of trade-offs, and so that we can actually talk about if we're all about to go into 2022 planning soon around how to add more people to the engineering team or not. And we want to foster that thinking conversation on a regular basis. And that's how we actually operate. So that's a little circular dog food part of it. Jellyfish does this, and we actually do it with a Jellyfish tool on that side. But you could do this too by hand if your team would permit it. But I think the important part is to be talking about this stuff on a regular basis.
Yep, I think that answers the question really well. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, no problem.
So we have a pre-submitted question, a slight variation of the last question. So I think the last question itself was addressing more towards I think the product communication. But how about on the level of trust? I think there has been in this conversation we had so far, there has been conversation on that tension between engineering and sales have different points of time. So how do you recommend towards building trust?
I mean, I wish, it's the same way that how do you and I establish trust, which is we spend time together and work on projects together. It's really simple in that way. And I think, I actually go back to what I actually just said to Cindy, which is we should be working on things together, right? We should be, Julius, we should be doing sales calls together. Maybe you should be working on a deal with me once, so you actually understand what it takes to kind of, let's say we sold a deal to Boeing together. Well, you should be working with me on that. So we actually do work on the deal together. Like, let's call me the sales rep on Boeing, and let's make you, the on point for actually building Boeing features. I'm picking on Boeing just an example, but like it's a thing that we can actually work on together on a regular basis. Like Jules, you should come on sales calls with me. We should just do it, and like maybe like we should work on an implementation project together on this stuff, right? So I actually think trust is established by working on things together successfully, but also sometimes working through the nuances of it. It's okay if we're going to argue, by the way. I don't want to pretend arguing is not important. Sometimes people think arguing is negative. Well, I don't want to argue for argue's sake, but like I'm picking on Julius, we need to have a debate. He thinks we should do this by December. I'm like, I need you to do this by November. Like, let's duke it out, right? We're going to have that fight for a little while. But at the end of it, I think we need to finish the argument. We're going to make a trade-off together. Be like, okay. Like, I need it by November. You think we need to do it? Like, can we do it by like, American Thanksgiving, like the end of November? And I know, like, I will dance. I will tap dance for the customer. I will, you give them excuses. I'll give them, a little bit of discount on this stuff. But can you just push a little bit harder and we'll work it out? And you're like, okay, Julius and I will work it out. We'll come together and we'll get that there. And so the act of compromising, like the debate, the storming, the norming, kind of working through that together is how you establish trust, because we now worked on a negotiation together. We worked on a target date together. We worked on shipping a product together. So I think that's how you build trust, which is you go through those cycles of spending time together, but also working through conflict together, right? I think those are important.
We have a member of the audience who also agrees with that. Mark was mentioning that arguments is an opportunity for growth.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Mark. Like you and it's not just growth for a single person; it's growth for all of us together. So, Mark, you're with me. You should be up here telling the story. You're doing it right.
Okay, so I'm gonna take another pre-submitted question. In fact, this is actually quite similar to another question that another member of the audience asked. So, to summarize this question, I think it's asking about its hybrid roles. Besides, the CEO who obviously has to come in with the product first, and sometimes doing engineering work, like you coming from the POV of an engineer. So, are there any other such hybrid roles that you would recommend, and is it beneficial to a company?
Absolutely, right. I actually think that. Look, I set this up by sales and engineering a little bit because it's simple to explain. But I think hybrid roles are very powerful, right? Like, and yes, if you push come to shove, if you look at it from a finance perspective, all of these roles end up serving, your R&D line item or your kind of sales and marketing line item. So I'm not making a financial argument here, but there are plenty of roles that fall in between. So, I'll just, brainstorm a couple that are really important. I think sales engineering is often not talked about enough as a really powerful role. I actually, when I do a lot of college advising, I actually think this is for people that actually want to learn, engineers that want to actually learn a function in a company. I think sales engineering is probably one of the best career paths. I did that early in my career because, look, as an engineer, we're taught how to build things. We're talking about like problem solving, and we're pretty good at saying no, but we never know how to like lean forward and convince someone of something. And I think sales engineering is this magical role where you're the subject matter expert, you're the product expert, and you get brought in on calls, right? And so it's a great place to see a few things. You get to see how sales works. You actually understand the product. And from a career path perspective, most people that go through sales engineering often end up, if they really like sales engineering, they end up fully going to sales. But often that actually sales engineer is a great pathway to product, because if you're in that seat, you know exactly what's the customer need to really get this deal done. If the feature just did this one more thing, we'd actually be able to sell this deal. That instinct is exactly what really makes a great product manager, because product really is about building just enough to get the sale done, to get that strategic objective done. And then you do the next thing, right? It's not to build the full dimensionality of the stuff because you can't afford it, right? Someone else will do that, it beat you on the next thing. And so that art and that taste is actually often coming through, that you can see it in sales engineering. I think product management, of course, is a great place because, and again, it's in that split between sales and engineering is a great place to do it. And let's not forget about customer success. I think at a lot of contemporary companies where, it is the users are themselves actually usage is it'll determine the actual revenue and the product and the renewals and the upsells. Well, the product success really is a contemporary sales engineer, a contemporary salesperson. And so don't forget working on that line can actually be a really powerful place to be. So yeah, I both think these are important functions for companies, but also from a career pathing perspective, there are great ways to learn about both sides of the business in that way.
Awesome.
Cool, thanks. And then we actually wanted to go back to an earlier item that Andrew has talked about, which is arguments, debates, which actually kind of helps us get the best ideas out, and then we kind of move forward together. And I think this is quite common in the Valley, probably in Boston as well, and surely it's very common in Singapore, whereby you have people from all over the world coming together and building stuff. And you have certain cultures that thrives in debates, like they're more than happy to yell at the top of their lungs, and then after the debate is over, let's have beer together. And then you have Asians who's like, okay, whatever the boss wants, I'm going to be quiet and just do whatever so you get what I mean. So like you have all these kind of how do you kind of like encourage a healthy debate, given that in a multicultural society with people having different backgrounds, approaching it with the very different lenses?
Yeah. Okay. I think it's interesting, Julius. I hadn't thought of this before. You're talking about cultural norms, and like what's appropriate and what's not. Like I actually will say, like, it's interesting you brought it up, and thank you for bringing it up because it's very nuanced for me, right? I grew up in an Asian household with Asian values and sensibilities, and like I clearly am running a company in a very Western world and all of these things, and the duality is complicated. Again, I don't think there's a single answer for all of these things. I think every company has to find their own voice in this. And I think, like, clearly, yes, if those two cultures are just bashing heads in this stuff, then yeah, you have a problem, right? There's both a problem kind of emotionally, culturally, but also from an operational perspective. I bet you that doesn't work, right, as a company, right? Like, the yellers are over dominating the ones that are used to being quiet, and you're not actually getting their voices brought up there. I think I can offer my opinion as a leader, and I encourage all of you, which is I think you literally have to be thoughtful to all those dimensions, right? I think you have to be aware that everybody is different in that way. Julius, the fact that you're bringing it up means that you're already there. And I think as a founder, as a leader, it's our responsibility to make sure that voices are heard appropriately, but that people can work effectively in that way, right? And yeah, that means that like you can't have one group make another group not actually talk, because functionally you're just losing out on ideas on that stuff. But counterpoint, like I think it's also important to encourage people that are quiet to actually speak up too, right? And then on a personal aspect, look, my own lesson on this is like I actually, someone who grew up with Asian values and norms, and then living in a Western kind of commercial world, I frankly don't think it works super well. I've had to teach myself to be less of an introvert, to actually be out there and actually be noisier, and to do webinars and to be out there actually sharing my thoughts, because I don't think it actually behooves in a Western culture professionally just to be quiet and keep it to yourself. You don't actually make progress, both individually but also as a company. So those are all lessons that I'm actually very keenly aware of on a personal front. But I don't want to make my own story to be the one that's right for every company, right? I think every company and team needs to find their own rhythm on that stuff, and it's back to it is the culture of the company. This is why culture dictates outcomes of companies. It will that how you can find that place where you can actually move the company forward will matter a lot. Hey, so I'm actually gonna choose a question here because I just did. I'm choosing a question from Azizi. And Azizi from Taiwan. This is actually this is my old friend from high school, and so Azizi, props out to your company Zing, who does electric race cars out in Taiwan. I hope you and your family are doing well. We haven't seen each other in years. So he actually posed a question, which is how do you feel it's useful for sales personnel to have a background in engineering? So I actually wouldn't make a blanket statement one way or the other. I actually would unpack to understand, as you grow our respective businesses, to understand who our buyer actually is. So you actually have to unpack, what's your sales motion, right? Who's your buyer? What are they doing? What's their psychology along the way? What are they looking for in that process? And so, like, if your buyer is technical, okay, and they're chock full of jargon and they're making technical decisions on things, then yeah, your sales organization probably needs to be reciprocally technical, right? If it turns out your buyer is, despite being a CIO title, but is actually really only talking business demands and project deadlines and all of those things, then it may not be as germane for that to be a technical. But I don't want to say that the sales personnel itself has to necessarily be technical. You could solve this problem by actually having a sales engineer, right, in that case. Now, of course, these statements have limits to this stuff, right? If you're selling a very technical product and a salesperson can't figure out how to turn a computer on, well, you probably have a problem there, right? So I think there are gradients along this. But I think but you really do have to ask yourself, like, what's the sales motion? Who's your buyer? What are they looking for along the way to help them make decisions? And how are you going to actually service that with your team here, right? Because if sales really is around just fostering, the process along, well, then the actual act of sales is like working with procurement and working, making sure that, red lines of contracts are clean on that stuff. Well, that's not a very technical thing. But if sales is really about understanding the nuance around why this feature works differently, or the need to lead them to do something very differently, well, it's somewhat of an inspirational sale that actually needs to speak to a CTO, then I would say that, like, that person better be able to have the voice to be able to speak in that way, right? So I think it's worth unpacking who the buyer is, what the point in time is, what's their decision criteria, what's the sales motion. We'll actually answer more of that question. So I know that wasn't a simple answer, but I think it's really unpacking and asking around the buyer and their journey is really important. And thanks for reaching out. It's good to see you.
Wow, nice that we are connecting, both of you, after so many years. Thanks for joining us, Azizi. Yeah, and I guess we have a couple of last questions. We are running out of time, but really insightful session so far. I think this came in from a pre-submitted question. So it's asking about how the sales team is not incentivized in the same way as the other teams. So they have sales quotas. So how can the company drive alignment without sacrificing engagement?
Ooh, interesting. Okay. I think engagement, I'm assuming they mean employee engagement, I assume, right, in that question. So yeah, I agree. Sales teams are dramatically different. Sales is incentivized. For those that aren't familiar with it, this may sound crazy, but salespeople are incentivized with, they have base salaries, and then they have quotas and bonuses, and they get commission on their sales. And that's often how sales teams are driven. And so sometimes you share this with engineers and they're like, wait a minute, like they get paid extra for everything they actually sell? Well, like, you have to remember though that, hey, engineer, they probably have half the salary that you think they do, because half of their compensation is built in variable compensation. So you could have it too, by the way. Let me just chop your salary in half. And then you have to actually, make it back up by delivering on that. So it's not all, and let's not forget, quotas and variable comp and commissions, they're all related. So the quotas are, if you don't sell that much, then you may not be here longer term. So I think when you explain this to an engineer, they may actually like, so wait a minute, I actually get my salary cut in half, and I might not be here 2 quarters from now because I didn't actually make enough stuff. Okay, so like, actually, okay, I like what we're doing right now. So I do think that they are different. They're different cultures, different compensations. I think there's different norms. Part of the reason is that sales is somewhat transactional, right? It is discretized, and it's discretized on an individual basis. It's discretized by a binary accomplished or not statement. in that one, and it allows that kind of objectivity alignment of the dollars to that way. So I think that is like, you know, I think there's just a natural fit, and then there's culture and history that actually happens there. I think engineering doesn't have that, and I think part of the history is that it's harder to discretize in individual output to the point of actually saying like, oh, like both in terms of like, did they get exactly done, and also like, is it this person versus a team sport, because we often build together as a group, right? And what I mean by that is that often if you were to apply the same lens, you could say that, well, you know, you could finish something, but it's chock full of bugs. Is it actually done? So it doesn't have the same discretized as like I sold a sale and something hit a bank account. And then also the other part of it is like, look, we often work in teams in a collaborative setting with multiple PRs, and features are built for multiple people. So is it one person or not that actually ships this stuff? And so both of those dynamics make it historically harder to actually align, you know, compensation in this way to what the engineers do. So I think it's so and then on top of it, you overlay culture, and then that makes it why the compensation patterns are very different across those. I do think though that actually as you know, as engineers kind of move into various forms of leadership, it is not uncommon that leaders actually do have some variable comp where some of their compensation is actually tied to company performance. Well, why? It's like a head of engineering probably should care whether a company hits its quarterly target or not. It's just like sales target or not. Like, it's just like, because look, the reality is if the company doesn't actually hit their sales target, they may not get their next round of funding. They may not do the next thing. And so you know, as companies grow, you probably do want, you know, at later stages, senior members of various parts of the team to have goals tied to company performance as a whole, because not only you want them rowing in that direction, but also that they could affect the outcomes, right? So back to Julius's and I old debate, like, hey, this thing needs to be shipped by November and us to actually hit the sales target. It might be useful if Julius was running the engineering team that he actually at least has some skin in the game to realize that, yeah, we probably do need to ship it in November in that way. But I think it's, you know, you have to be judicious as the companies grow to actually make sure that actually matches the culture of the company. You don't want a situation where engineering gets overly mercenary, where they're slinging bad code for the sake of doing this. And so again, I think there's an art to this, and I think there are some norms as companies mature along the way. Hopefully that answered the question broadly in that setting.
Thanks for the awesome answer.
And the last bit, sorry, like I think Julius brought up stock options. Like, you know, like look, stock options as a startup construct are an important aligning factor, right? Because it is the hope and desire that like if we win, we all win together in these things. And so I do think that is a vehicle that talks about alignment that is longer term. So it's not a quarter by quarter, deal by deal scenario. It is one that is around macro winning and alignment. So I think that is one example of a construct that can actually help there.
So okay, we're running a bit low on time. So I think, but that said, we've gone through a lot of interesting questions today. Thanks for going through you know, different analogies as well as your experiences, you know, with us as well as with rest of our audience. Before we close, would you like to talk a little bit more about Jellyfish and you know how the audience can reach out to you if they're interested?
Yeah, hey, thank you for this. And again, thank you for everyone that's out on this call to actually listen. I think I really appreciate the attention to these topics. I think it's important. So yeah, Jellyfish is a software company. We're based in Boston, Massachusetts, where we focus on you know, helping engineering leaders kind of understand and build alignment with their teams around where they're going. And you know, it is a SaaS software offering that connects with tools like Jira, GitHub, and Bitbucket, and GitLab to provide those insights. And yeah, like, you know, you can go to jellyfish.co and check out what we're actually up to. You can sign up for a demo, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to actually talk to you about what we're actually doing here. And like, you know, for us, you know, this mission as a whole is really about helping engineering leaders and companies make better decisions. And so like this discussion today actually fits into my personal mission in this whole space. And yes, our software does help manifest this as well. but from a broad base, I want us all to collectively get better in our roles here. And if Jellyfish software can actually help us do that, then we're more than happy to actually work together with you. So please reach out.
Thanks, Andrew. So there you have it. Definitely do check out their company site, jellyfish.co. Oh, I think we'll post it in the comments later on as well. And yeah, definitely looking forward to connect with you over on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us today. Sharing with us your experiences, and being with us today. I think on your side, as you mentioned, it's a very early morning for you currently.
Yeah. Well, hey, look, this is great because I rarely get a chance to actually work across time zones in this manner, and I look forward to visiting you guys soon, and hopefully you guys get to come here because I think Jellyfish Singapore is around the corner. I can feel it.
Ah.
All right, talk to you all soon, and thank you again for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Andrew.
much, Andrew. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so yep, we're going to the closing of today's events, but don't go yet. There's still plenty of announcements. If you have been with us at the start of the entire event today, yes, we're going to be covering the events that are going to be coming in the next few weeks. So the first event that's going to be arriving in just 2 weeks. We have the team of working overseas for small talk on the 15th of September. So definitely do join us. Our speaker is going to be from Google, Bok.
Hey,
But the
Megan.
next speaker is from Facebook. Now, this is when you're doing live streams at like late at night, things can start getting messed up. Okay, but that's it. Yes, our next speaker over here, she's from Facebook, engineering manager from Facebook. And her event is going to be we're going to be hosting her on the 2nd of October. So do check out this event. Watch out for our social channels in the weeks to come. We'll give more updates on these 2 different events. Okay, so yep, that's all. Well, have a good Thursday evening and almost TGIF for Friday. Bye, guys.
Good night. Bye.